Hello everyone, my name is Lucy Heavens and welcome to CMO Therapy, a podcast that's hopefully going to help you navigate your way through your marketing journey. Because let me tell you, I get it, being a marketing leader is no walk in the park. In each episode, we are going to dive headfirst into the world of marketing, where uncertainty, tight budgets and fierce competition are just the beginning of the rollercoaster ride. But guess what? You are not alone in this. Why go solo when you can tap into the powerhouse of insights from some of the most awesome marketing leaders in the game? And look, the title might include the word therapy, but we are not just talking about challenges here. We are tackling them head on. So join us as we deep dive into the nitty gritty, share war stories and unlock secret strategies. And get ready for no holds barred conversations because sometimes I have no filter. So if you are a chief marketing officer, a marketing lead, or someone just looking to up their marketing game, then I am so glad that you are here with us today. And I am very glad to have with me today the very awesome Paul Taylor. Paul, would you like to give the audience a little bit of an introduction?
Yeah, hey Lucy. I've also got no filter, so this is going to be fun. I am an ex-CMO. The start of my career was in banks, so 16, 17 years in banks. Had a bit of a spell in fintech, and today I work as a fractional CMO across a number of different brands.
Excellent. Good stuff. So the title for today's podcast is Your Customers Are Doing the Marketing. Are You Letting Them? Which is really interesting. And how this came about was we were having a very good chat about kind of customer advocacy and the different ways that people think and tackle it. And I think we kind of all agree, or nobody would ever disagree, or no CMO would ever disagree that it's not important. But it still amazes me how very few teams still actually invest in it properly. And I think especially in my world, in the world of technology, I think it's almost a little bit of an afterthought sometimes, which actually makes me really sad. But, let's do a quick kind of case study because we've just seen this customer win. And I think too often it gets reduced to kind of a bunch of logos in a slide, where can we put them, or on the website, or like I said, just like that last minute case study, or can we just have a quote or something like that? So I think customer advocacy for me is kind of really becoming that serious growth lever in any marketing strategy. So that's what I really wanted to pick your brains about and unpack how we can do that properly.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, right? I mean, I think, similarly to you, whether you're working fractionally across different companies or whether you're working full time in a business, I think you very often see that teams are just completely obsessed with creating more marketing, whatever that looks like, and certainly from a customer's perspective, it's let's do some case studies, let's slap a logo on, let's kind of put it up on LinkedIn and hey, yeah, great. But actually, I think there's just a lot more that you can do with it. I think there's a lot more power that you can get from your customers from a marketing point of view. And I think particularly today where there's just so much AI noise out there, I think the only thing that your prospects are probably really going to believe in is listening to somebody that's already lived with the decision that they've made to use your technology, if technology is the thing that you're trying to promote. I just think it's a really underutilized lever, I think, in kind of that broader marketing mix.
100%. Yeah. So tell me then, if I was just to start off kind of work broad, I suppose, an introduction, like what does customer advocacy mean to you? So when I say that to you, what do you kind of think of?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess the spoiler has already been said, but it really isn't just slapping a logo onto a PDF. It's not even dumping 10 grand on a video and then having something really nicely shot in their offices. I think it's really kind of customers almost voluntarily putting themselves and their voice and indeed their reputation and their company's reputation on the line for you. And I think that really shows up when, a customer can explain, I guess, your value and your value prop and your differentiation better than even you can as a marketer, or where they might be defending your product in a buying committee. And with the extension of buying groups these days, where there's anything like 10 different sort of people involved in decisions and things when they're trying to buy some technology, if you've got that champion in the account and they're actually extolling all of your virtues and they're actually coming forward and really advocating for you, I think that's a really big thing. Likewise, I think that whole kind of peer-to-peer influence piece is really important as well. And I know that you're in a couple of the same networks as me on WhatsApp. Like, there's nothing like seeing peers of ours in some of those chat rooms when somebody comes in and says, "Do you know X?" And there are people out there that are immediately coming back with, "Yes, this person, these are the people that you need to use." And I think that's probably where, the most powerful pipeline for companies comes from. It's not necessarily in campaigns, although obviously campaigns are still a thing, but I think it's actually customers telling other customers, actually, this thing that you're hearing about or this thing that you need really does work in the real world. And I think really marketing's role is not to manufacture that voice. I think we all as marketers need to find a way of being able to, amplify and scale that without killing its authenticity. And I think that's the kind of line that we need to tread. So for me, it's much more kind of getting that customer to say nice things about you without necessarily asking them. Not so much kind of just generating new assets, because to be frank, there's just millions of assets out there, and I think it's just getting worse and worse.
That's really interesting, and I love the fact that you've jumped into that. That I like the kind of description of customer advocacy about having somebody talk about you when you're not in the room, basically, and then that
Yeah,
immediately puts it into that kind of like growth space, doesn't it? Rather than the like just a bit of like proof, I suppose. It is
yeah.
actually, it's like having another sales team out there for you all the time, right?
Exactly. And then, like, finding ways of being able to tap into platforms. I was on something earlier, I made a note actually, where is it? Like people were talking about how to rank in GEO or AO, like pick whatever phrase it is that you're behind at the moment when it comes to AI search. But Reddit, obviously a really good example of a platform, a chat room through which people talk about brands and things that they're buying and things that they're doing. Apparently, I think it's something like 30% of AI search hits are coming from that platform, which I think, just again, back to my point, which is, use your customer voice. Your customer voice is the most powerful thing that you can possibly use. Whether that's getting an advocacy for a deal or getting an advocacy into this kind of new magic out there in terms of getting your brand to rank somewhere that it historically hasn't needed to. And yeah, your growth point, really does hit home for me. I think, again, with so much AI based content, I think buyers are starting to kind of really struggle with trust. And I mentioned it before, but I think, a prospect understanding that somebody has lived with the decision, have survived the decision, really does de-risk the decision that they need to make. And I think, this kind of trust element is really starting to collapse in terms of how people feel about brands. We're just overloaded with either paid media or AI generated content or endless thought leadership. I just think buyers are becoming quite numb to everything. And actually, I think buying has also gone kind of dark. Like, we've heard for years, like, if anyone's ever had like a Forrester Cirrus decision seat or something like that, like over the last few years, it's gone from like 6 touches to 8 touches to 10 touches, now 16 touches, 18 touches. Like, how many touches does somebody need before they get into a funnel in B2B SaaS? And I think actually these days, by the time a buyer even speaks to sales, I truly think they've already formed an opinion in terms of whether they're actually going to buy from you or not. And again, I think very often that is actually shaped by somebody that they already know that's used you. So you better make sure that whatever that brand promise is that you're making, and whatever those claims are that you're making, that it actually stacks up in terms of what people are seeing when they're actually using your tools. I don't think really this advocacy thing is nice to have anymore. I think it's almost like an insurance that you need in terms of making sure that your brand's got some kind of relevance as we step into this kind of bold new future.
I think what normally, I love the what you just said, 'cause like you say that what it made me think actually is that a lot of marketing teams, or I think a lot of marketing strategies that I see aren't strategies, right? They're marketing plans,
Yeah,
and they're starting very much from the kind of the bottom up, right? It's like, this is kind of what we're gonna do next year, like not what the path that's going to kind of get us there. This is what we're going to do. And I think this is where the customer advocacy for me kind of falls down, because automatically then you're jumping straight to something like a case study, because that case
yeah,
study is sits on the growth side or whatever. It sits as part of that customer journey. It's that proof point kind of like right at the end. If
Yeah.
you took it up or spun it the other way, whatever you want to call it, and said, right, okay, customer advocacy is going to be part of my strategy. What's the kind of strategy there? Then suddenly you're opening up, so many doors. Like, don't think about the tactics yet. Just think about, like you said, like what it is that you kind of what you want to achieve out of it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, look, how many companies have we all walked into where you walk into some kind of leadership role in marketing and you ask what the objective is and it's growth?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, like no shit, right? Yeah, I understand that you need growth. Great, fantastic. Actually, the first question should be, who is it that I can talk to that's used the product? Where are your advocates?
Yeah.
Because customers don't buy growth.
Mhm.
Customers are buying something because they've got a problem. They feel that that's actually going to help, the thing that they need to solve, be that in a fin crime space, be that in a data space, be that in a, whatever space that you're working within. Like, concentrate on where the value points are, concentrate on who it is that's going to get behind what you need to say, and then start there. And then, if you've genuinely got a great product and if you've genuinely got a great set of customers, obviously more difficult at an early stage of a business where you're trying to win the first customers, but in most cases you'll already have some pilots. Like, what are the points that they're talking about? Where is it that they light up? And wherever it is that they're lighting up and getting engaged and excited, that's where you need to really concentrate. So yeah, I think I think that whole thing that you mentioned in terms of flipping it on its head is a good idea.
I think I like what you just say. Is so true, actually. And this is, I'll be totally honest, hold my hands up. This is where I think I failed, kind of in some roles, kind of like way back when I went in and kind of automatically just, this is going to sound really bad, but just believed that everything internally, like that everybody told me. So, the product teams kind of showing me demos of the solution and telling me that it's really great for all of these reasons. Here's all the value pillars, here's all the benefits, the proof points, the ROI, like everything. You just believe everything that people tell you. And it wasn't until sort of then you kind of get, like partway down the line and you start kind of hearing different things from the customer and you're a bit like, oh, okay. Like I never thought to actually question it. Yeah. But
And
yeah.
then you go to product and you're like, oh, I've just heard this. What do you think? And they're like, oh.
Oh, no,
Yeah, can
no. Well, I
sometimes
never
be a bit
thought about
awkward.
that. Talking to a customer, are you sure? But yeah, no, that's what I learned now that, yeah, every kind of role that I go into, it's the first thing that I do. And I try and sort of continue that as well, because you get such a different story from them and you get it in their words, not with the, I can say this because I'm a marketer, but the marketing fluff on top of it.
Yeah, no, 100%. Do you know what? I've actually become quite mercenary. I won't even entertain kind of going too far into a process without actually having a demo. So I actually want to understand how the product works. I ask those questions before I even get too far into kind of an interview or a conversation to go, okay, and where are the problems? Because one of my character traits is that I genuinely cannot sit in one of these roles if I don't believe in what something's doing.
Yeah.
I can't, I've got no interest in lying. Like, it's either great technology or it isn't. Like, it's pretty black and white for me.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you kind of tell the difference then? Because it sounds like we've sort of both, you've been in the same situation as Mina, but how do you tell the difference then between those organizations that are saying, look, we don't have fans, or even we do have fans, or we're not just listening to them properly? That whole
Yeah,
like inside out, outside in thinking.
yeah. I mean, like, in terms of kind of trying to understand whether you're walking into a bit of a mess or whether it truly is what people are marketing before you walk in, obviously using the same things that I mentioned, whether that's things like G2 reviews, Gartner peer insights, all of your kind of Reddit threads and all those sorts of things, I think really help. But for those companies that are sitting there that go, well, I don't think I've got any advocates, like, how do we make a start? Actually, I think it's more that they're lacking a kind of habit of listening, because if customers are renewing or they're expanding through cross-sell or upsell, or if they're coming back on things really quickly when you reach out to them, or if you've asked them something and they come back with something like, yeah, I'd be really happy to help. Like, you've got advocates, right? There are people in that account, there are people in that customer base that are happy to help, that they are happy to engage. So I think it's kind of developing that habit or that system around listening and kind of making sure that you're tapping into that. And I think the other thing that many people kind of make some mistakes on really is that they think that that listening is via kind of all of the formal things, like your
Mhm.
NPS surveys and your formal references and your marketing led asks. All of these things that people kind of point to are more traditional models. But I think actually what I've found is that these advocates live elsewhere. They're normally hiding in Slack messages or somewhere buried into a support ticket. Or another great tip when you join a company, in sales call scripts or customer success call scripts, any of those things. I've also been blessed to work in companies where we've had very, very large communities of users. We're talking 60, 70,000 users in communities that are talking about your product. And that's absolute gold in two different ways. Like one, and with AI, it's a lot easier. You can actually kind of tap into those threads and understand what people are saying and kind of get some sentiment in terms of where people are at. But two, you can really use those communities to help you ideate in it, to do new things. Like a great example was I needed, there was a large presence in Latin America, and we needed some particular use cases within LATAM for a particular industry. And like, we didn't have anything on the bench. Our pre-sales people were just too busy. And so I was just like, well, let's just throw a question into the community then. And just a really well-written question. I ended up getting like 30 or 40 use cases back. I even got a couple of the users willing who spoke Spanish to kind of hop on a quick iPhone video and talk through them. Floated that across to the LATAM team, and they were just overjoyed. And then they started to kind of be able to talk to the customers and prospects down there about what was happening. So I think you need to tap into all of these different things and not just kind of go for the usual things like your NPS surveys. Like, I'm not saying they're useless or that they don't work or you don't need them, but I think you need to kind of have that coalescence of all of these different things to kind of get an even view, I guess, across what people are thinking.
Definitely. Yeah. I love that. That's such a great idea. So,
The other, sorry,
oh, sorry, go on.
so the other thought, right? And I think we're all probably we probably all do this all the time. I think there's also a tendency to wait for perfection. I'd actually focus more on momentum. And the kind of quick, dirty filming, like I mentioned, is a great example of that. It doesn't have to be glossy. And actually, even more so these days where everyone's generating glossy AI content, I think some of that stuff that looks a little bit more real is actually a lot more believable these days as well.
Yeah, on that then, that's really good. Like, so what you're building is this kind of consistent engine rather than kind of having a car sitting on the driveway and just trying to start it once a year with an NPS survey or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I wrote a note when I was prepping for this, and I think I wrote something, I can't find it now, but I think I wrote it something like kind of good advocacy is like a flywheel, it's not a campaign. And I think that taps into your analogy around an engine. So yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. So what does that kind of engine, what does a good engine look like for you? How would you kind of how would you build one?
Yeah, so kind of three or four different stages, I guess. Kind of find those moments that are worth talking about. I think that advocacy typically starts in kind of product and delivery and absolutely not in marketing. I don't think there's any kind of magic communications plan or wand that we can wave that fixes a mediocre experience, right? I mean, if it comes back to that whole thing of if the product's crap, then it probably is crap, right? So you need to find the bits that are worth talking about and not really sweat the things that need to be fixed in some roadmap delivery somewhere down the line. I think you need to find a way of being able to have participation from a customer that feels to them that's very low friction, low effort. So it's not so much, can you write a case study? It's more things like, can we hop on a phone for 15, 20 minutes over a cup of tea and just have a chat about a few things? It's things like preforming some content so that the effort's not on them. Be they quote approvals, be they kind of, snippets of information that you can then build out later. But also, I wouldn't discount using things like small round tables, particularly if they can then learn from their peers. And that whole kind of peer-to-peer networking and learning thing, I think, is something you can give back to that customer if it's run in the right way. Or if they're also struggling with things that that another customer has fixed, not necessarily with your product, but just in general as a human being, then that kind of quiet intro to one of their peers is actually you kind of giving something back to them as well, in order to kind of generate that goodwill. And I think, like taking a look at where these things appear. So kind of have them on multiple different surfaces, right? So not just on your website, but make sure that you're taking time to get that into a sales enablement moment. Make sure that you're taking time to get some of that great material material that you've learned into events, into dinners, into webinars, and also into communities if you happen to have one. And then I think, like you need to kind of square the whole thing off really in terms of how do you then measure some impact as well. So, I think the best ways, or the best way I've seen these things work is, you track influence pipeline, you track velocity, you track your win rates that have actually had some advocate involvement in some way, shape or form. And then you also track acceleration in terms of how quickly that account then kind of renews. Like, is the renewal drama? Question mark. Has that person then gone on to cross sell, buy something from a cross sell or upsell perspective? Like making sure that you've got those kind of metrics and those points, I think is really important, because you're going to be naturally asking some people to spend time on this. There might be a little bit of spend here and there in terms of some tech. Like, you need to make sure that you're kind of evidencing some payback beyond the obvious, which is kind of getting those advocates to be vocal about what you're doing. So kind of having that, you mentioned it before, kind of no fluff, and I'll just add a word, having some economics around it so you can actually go, look, this is what we've achieved.
Yeah, exactly. And then that's going to inform next year. So then you can sort of sit back and say, okay, well, this is where I think we need to invest more,
Yeah.
time. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly. Yeah.
And I like that there are so many different, I have to go back to listen to this again, listen to it back and write them down, but so many different ideas there for different types. And one of the things kind of occurred to me as I was listening to all these different um, channels, I suppose, or ways of kind of getting the customer to talk, is it
Mm.
kind of depends as well, doesn't it, what you want them to say or what you want to talk about. And what I mean by that, I'll tell you a story actually, and that is, I remember being at a firm years ago, and we had this customer that was using the product in quite a clever way. Like, they'd sort of made up, I suppose, almost their own use case, and we were like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. So we had a customer conference, and we got the customer to come along and talk through their use case, and that's what we wanted them to do, just talk through the use case and educate the rest of the customers that this is how they could be, another way they could be using the product. And the customer did a really good job of that presentation, but they spent quite a chunk of time telling the rest of the audience how fantastic we were as a company and how much they loved us. And like, they honestly, they really went deep on oh, they're so great, they're such nice guys, like really lovely guys, and like really went into one, so much so that actually the rest of the audience was sort of sitting there a little bit like, have they paid them to
Yeah.
stand up there? But what I'm trying to
Was
get
sitting
at,
at the front embarrassed.
exactly, yeah. I'm like, we didn't ask for a testimonial. A
Yeah.
testimonial to me is something very different. What we wanted them to do was to go on stage and actually just talk about that use case, very kind of like factually.
Yeah.
This is kind of how we're using the platform. That was what we wanted. But I obviously didn't do a very good job of communicating that kind of up front. And they went full blown into the testimonial, which 100% wasn't the right place to do that. So I think, yeah, what you want out of it as well, I think, is a really good thing to kind of go back to, because that will help inform you then what the channel is that you use.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think when we were prepping for this, you were talking about sort of the design of advocacy that feels like a celebration and doesn't feel like desperation almost.
Yeah, yeah,
And like, that's a really good example of it, right? When somebody's actually up there celebrating who you are as a company, and then kind of getting on to the point of, okay, and this is how we're using the product. I think the moment that kind of advocacy feels like somebody's doing you a massive favor, I actually don't think that's a win at all. I think that's a loss. And so I think, you need to find ways of being able to flip that dynamic a little bit. Instead of, can you please help us? Would you mind helping us? Can you do me a favor? I
yeah,
think trying to flip that into, how can I help you showcase how you've solved a problem? And, like certainly in my experience at my prior company, there were people that could actually connect back the things that they'd done with us to their career growth. And I think once you're actually kind of in that space and people are kind of growing through the ranks within companies and moving into different companies and taking bigger roles because of what they've learned and how they've used your product and what they've done for a business, is really the win that you're looking for. It advances their career, elevates their thinking, their experience, kind of puts their, not just themselves, but also their brand on stage, which obviously then helps them internally as well.
yeah,
And I just think it kind of avoids those advocates feeling kind of used. I know that's a bit of a negative phrase, but like, I think you need to kind of avoid that. I've just done X company a favor, and actually you want them to feel more like they've been seen and that there's something that they can actually write in their own review at the end of the year to go, hey, listen, I went along to this conference. I spoke about this, I got some great feedback. Like, you want to find that way of people being able to feel good about themselves as well, at the same time as, kind of helping you on your way, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. I had this situation recently, actually. It was crazy. And I went to like a CMO networking event, and I had two separate CMOs come up to me and tell me about a particular product, a particular tool, like a marketing tool.
Yeah.
And they didn't know each other, but they both told me about this tool, and it was amazing. And I trust them both. So to get kind of testimonials, from two different, completely different sources, kind of saying that this tool is absolutely fantastic. I mean, that's so powerful. It really
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, I agree.
And I did go on to get that tool
Well, there we go.
myself.
Works.
And yeah, exactly. Totally works. Yeah, it's the best sales channel. So part one conversation I want to have about customer advocacy, which I always find really interesting, is there's always that element of like who kind of owns the customer, right? I mean, there's many ways that, and it is normally marketing is obviously the ones that end up doing kind of the case studies and producing all the materials at the end of the day. But then you've got customer success that really owns that relationship. I know I've been in situations like in the past where customer success are a little bit hesitant almost to introduce marketing, like to the customers, and they want to be the ones that are like having that conversation with the customer, and then it's like, just tell me what you want, like you
Yeah.
want them to do a case study, okay, I'll just ask them to do a case study with you. But yeah, anyway, who owns the customer advocacy in your view, or how have you worked with other departments in your roles?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. So I think the best way of thinking about it is that marketing owns the system, but in my view, the company owns the relationship. And
Mm,
that company word is really important. It's not sales, it's not marketing, it's not product, it's not customer success. It's the company. The company owns the relationship. The company owns the customer. But I think when it comes to advocacy as a program, I think it's marketing that owns the system. And then I think there's obviously this interesting intersection in terms of different groups. So I think product naturally own the value that's coming. I think customer success are arguably kind of masters of the trust that's being built. I think if you've got community, then that kind of handles that belonging piece, and then the marketing team is really owning the kind of scale in terms of what that advocacy looks like. And I think the problem is that if marketing really tries to own that advocacy piece alone, it feels not just internally but externally is very transactional, and it gets into that, please can you help me with this, please can you help me with that, and then invariably somebody in customer success or sales is there going, oh my god, you've just asked person X the 15th favor this month in terms of helping you with an event, a webinar slot, or whatever. And equally, if nobody owns it, then it never scales. So I think there needs to be just this recognition in amongst teams that there is a system and that everyone understands what the system looks like. The company owns the relationship, and it's actually everyone's job to try to get this thing to work. But in my view, I think if marketers can kind of act more like conductors or orchestrators, I guess, than owners, then that kind of brings everyone on the journey a little bit. And then there's the obvious things like just making sure that if you are putting marketers in front of customers, make sure that they are your best people. Like,
mm,
don't that like politely don't put one of the poorer performers in the team in front of people. Like, it needs to be somebody that you've identified as a future leader or something that you put in front of them, that they're having the right conversations as things come up, they're able to pivot, they're able to have decent conversations, they're able to think forward. Like, make sure that you've got the right people in front of those folk. Otherwise, you're on a kind of sticky wicket to begin with, certainly with internal teams, that they will then start getting frustrated that you've put somebody that's not very good in front of a customer, but you're not going to get what you need out of the engagement either.
mm.
So yeah, I think marketing owning the system and the company owning a relationship is a really nice way of being able to kind of level set in terms of what you're all trying to do.
That's a really good way of putting it. And again, I think it comes back to kind of having the strategy there. If you kind of lay that out in the strategy and say, this is my kind of customer, this is what my plans are, I suppose, and what my thoughts are about customer advocacy and what we can get around it. This is the role that we play, this is the role that other people play. And
Yeah,
yeah, if you can communicate that up front, then there isn't that defense, I suppose, over no,
yeah,
no, I own that relationship.
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, that happens, right? And, I think it's incumbent on people like me and you to kind of build those relationships, to break those barriers down as well. But I think just having an even understanding of, like, this isn't something I'm taking away from you. I'm just trying to orchestrate a motion here that's going to get us all to our end goal. I think that works quite well.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And if we have if we had a kind of a situation, I suppose, where you're just sort of starting out with your customer advocacy strategy, and you don't have a massive budget, but you kind of want to start testing the water and doing some bits and pieces, like where would you start? Where would you, if you was in that situation?
Yeah, I've been in that situation a lot. I think the kind of three scrappy moves or tactical moves. I think, I guess the first one is probably an obvious one, but it's worth stating. Kind of building an advocate shortlist, and I don't think that needs to take long. Like, I'm going to say 48 hours max. Like, ask sales, the customer success team, the founders, whoever it is that know the business the best. If I needed a reference now, who am I going to call? And I think that list is really gold, because that's kind of tapping straight into those people that they feel are already halfway there.
Mm.
And then I think it's a case of trying to create like a shared moment in a quick way, right? Within 90 days. That could either be a private round table, that could be a dinner, that could be a closed webinar. That's something with no slides, no pitch, go in with a theme and a couple of things that you want to find out, but it's just peers talking to peers and then you being part of that conversation. And it's not you being part of that conversation to inject, oh, did you realize we could do X? Like, no, you just need to genuinely be part of the conversation. And some of the best roundtables that I've ever been to have been with zero agenda. But then off the back of it, you've learned a ton of stuff in terms of the conversation that's been going on that you're then taking back and you're remembering and you're making notes or whatever. But you've also built a huge amount of credibility and relationships with people in that room, because they feel that they're actually genuinely there, for no kind of hidden agenda or anything like that. And then I think, like the other bit is to find that way in a quick way, again, within a quarter, to really hardwire any of those things that you've won, any of those insights that you've won, into sales through whatever enablement program it is that you're running, so that every rep, every salesperson, every customer success person, and indeed marketing, and I'll come back to that in a minute, they all know which customer stories are matching to which objections and things like that are coming up, and kind of when to offer an intro and not beg for one, right? It's that kind of relationship piece that I think really matters, because at the end of the day, I think kind of the advocacy that isn't connected in some way, shape or form to a good outcome for a company is just PR or fluff. So you need to try and get back to that kind of hardwiring all of your learnings through, once you've got that program up and running. I mentioned enablement and then the link with marketing. Beyond the obvious thing in terms of marketing enabling sales, what we actually put in place in my last company was marketing enablement. So don't forget to enable your marketers, right? Particularly if you're in a reasonably large team, making sure that everyone in that group has got the latest insights from your customer program, or your latest content from product marketing, or your latest competitive differentiation stuff, your competitive intel stuff. Make sure that's understood by everybody, because just like sellers, the marketers actually need to know where to press, where not to press, what maps to where, and how they can actually use some of the insights that their colleagues have got into their own programs. And that was a really good add over the last 12 months.
I really like how oh, excuse me. How hold on a second. I will have to cut that bit out.
Yeah.
Right, hold on. Right, I'm back. Yeah, that's really interesting. So, how do you keep that up? Like, things are changing quite a lot, right? When a customer is happy today, doesn't necessarily mean that they're happy tomorrow. We know that
Yeah.
happens. It does change quite a bit. So, like, how are you keeping that cadence? Sort of, what is the cadence?
Yeah, like, it needs to be built for the company that you're in, and the things that you're facing there and then. I mean, I think there are some great tools out there now, particularly if you've got access to things like communities. You've got access to Reddit threads, making sure that you've got some basic automations just to pull in some insights here and there to make sure that you're spotting where things are going wrong, but also just the basics, like making sure that this is actually on a regular agenda somewhere. Not well, depending on how often you catch up with sales and customer success and everyone else, like at least monthly, you need to be having this on an agenda that goes, right, here's where we're at with the advocacy program. This is how it's going. These are the assets that are coming out. We kept a pipeline of assets and things like that we knew that were coming through over the next 6 months as well, which was really handy in a couple of different ways. One, it kind of keeps you honest, make sure that you're tracking things, but also we've all been in situations where sellers are like, well, where's the next case study or whatever, like where's the next private dinner, when's the next moment that we're going to be meeting with this person? And you can quite easily go, well, actually you're on the mailing group and here's all the list of things that we're working on, here's the dates, like it's coming. Like you kind of get out of that kind of combative thing that can sometimes be there. So yeah, just making sure that you've got those regular touch points, that you're continually touching base, particularly with your top advocates, in terms of making sure that they're still with you, and making sure that you don't trip up. And don't sweat the kind of the upset that can sometimes happen when you lose a logo, right? I mean, if like all companies have churn, fine, okay, well I need to take big brand X off of the website. All right, fine, like not ideal, but I'm sure we've all done our best in order to kind of keep them on the platform and doing whatever it is that they're doing. Like kind of move past it. Actually, very often, you'll still find that the kind of advocates that you had within that business, even if they've gone off to a different provider, is still a massive advocate within the space and within the technology that you're using. And very often, you kind of loop back round at some point in the future in a different role, and things can change. So I just think making sure that you're kind of having space to talk about these things so that you can then monitor them over time is massively important.
Yeah, and I think a couple of things kind of spring to mind there as well. I think first of all, in the case of not losing a customer, but if you've got a customer that's not particularly happy at the moment, but they might not be happy with, I don't know, some sort of part of the system that's not working the way that they want it to. But that doesn't mean, like any relationship, that their relationship's over there. So actually, they might still be willing to have a conversation with marketing,
Yeah.
and for a different reason. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're completely unhappy and we shouldn't touch them. Having somebody outside of the normal sort of day-to-day relationship is probably maybe a bit of a welcome treat. And then the other thing is, I think, one of my, now I sort of thinking about what you said, like when you said about communities as well, I think a lot of marketing leaders sort of tend to be, or they don't get out there and meet with customers, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But a lot of the communities that you're part of, if you're part of the communities that you're kind of selling into, like I've had situations where I've bumped into somebody that works for, customer organization. They're not necessarily using our product. They're not part of that department. Like maybe I've spoken to the marketing person that's working for, a financial crime solution or whatever that we've sold into. Yeah, even just making those connections from the same organization are really, really helpful.
Yeah.
And you can start to kind of, understand a little bit more about what the general feeling across the company is about that product or service that you're offering or that you've
Yeah,
got in
it's
there.
it's a good one. I mean, we had lots of other programs as well. So previous company, we had MVP programs. So we kind of elevated some people within that advocate base and within that community base to be most valuable players that kind of came with a whole variety of different things. They were the first people that we reached out to for product feedback. You've got the kind of traditional things in terms of some swag and stuff, so that when there are events, they're wearing your hoodie. We did a lot of different things, like free training through the university and like all of these different things that really, really help kind of give some of those people as well an elevated experience in terms of the way that they're actually interacting with your business, which worked particularly well in that sector because it was like our economic buyers were the usual, right? We're all going for the same C-suite people, whatever. But then the reality was that the day-to-day work was actually done by a developer community. So, you had to find a way of being able to meet those developer
Yeah.
types, sort of where they were as well, in terms of what they wanted, what they expected, and what they liked.
We are coming up to time. I need to wrap up but I'm dying to ask your opinion on something. Like it is
Mm.
around customer advocacy. So last thing, but look, if we can try and make it quick. The question I have for you is, I was reading this article recently, and there's been a lot of noise around customer loyalty, like loyalty programs and kind of, like points and that sort of thing. And the
Yeah.
article was specifically about, I'm not going to call them out, but you'll know who I'm talking about, but like supermarkets out there that have these loyalty cards that actually, you go to the till and suddenly the price of your basket is literally like a fraction, like a third
Mm.
of the cost because suddenly you've swiped your club card or whatever it is, and
Mhm.
it's knocked it all off. But actually, if you went and bought those products in any other supermarket, it would be the third cost, if you know what I mean. They're
Yeah.
elevating it for those purposes. My point is, and my question is to you, like how, what do you think today about having these like loyalty programs and points and, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, look, as a human, I don't really. The only point system that I have is my BA card, and to be honest with you, I'm neither here nor there on that these days, to be honest, because it's always so difficult to use the Avios, and there's so many different rules and things like that. It's still a great program, but kind of hard to use. So I've never really bought into the whole kind of you have a club card, you have a Costa card, you have a whatever. Um, I also think it's particularly difficult to do those sorts of things in B2B tech. So my experience has always been in the B2B side of life, never in the kind of B2C, kind of that core consumer space. I don't know, like I guess some people like it because it makes them feel like a little, bit of a club. Some people like it because then they get some rewards off the back of it. I just don't know whether it's going to kind of generate any loyalty going forward. I think the loyalty that people will have for brands and product in the future will be much more connected to, am I able to trust you, i.e. not be ripped off? Am I getting something of value from your company? And are you actually meeting me where I need to be met? Like, this kind of whole thing of like only being able to get banking services from 9 till 5 drives people crazy. Like people are working from 8 till 6. So, how can I do the kind of core banking needs with some of the traditional banks? Just doesn't work. So I think it's actually going to be much more about kind of the experience that consumers are having with brands and the trust that they've got that they're kind of dealing with somebody that isn't going to rip them off or isn't doing sort of bad things that matter much more than, oh well, I've got a point balance of whatever that I can get a free coffee with.
Yeah.
I'm not
I'm a
I'm not
I'm a
that kind of
point
human.
I'm a points tart, I am,
Are
honestly.
you? You've got
Yeah.
you've
Oh
got
my God.
loads of different
Every
cards.
card going, sign me up, honestly. No, do you know
Brilliant.
what? I had an interesting situation, and just very quickly, and this is and maybe is the B2B kind of era of points and how they work. But there's a new app that I'm using called Sprive, and
No, no.
it's mortgages. It pays off your mortgage. So it's a bit like if you've ever had any of those referral apps that you've used, like Quidco or Cashback, Top Cashback, those sorts of things. It's basically that,
Yes.
but for you link it up to your mortgage. So every time that you go and shop with something, you go through the app Sprive and you earn cash back that you then pay direct into your mortgage account. So brilliant.
Interesting.
Like, yeah, super interesting. But had this really interesting situation where I signed up for it. Love it. I love the idea of doing this. Um, but the supermarket that I've shopped at for the past 30 years, and I am deeply loyal to, very, very loyal to, always have been, actually aren't on the platform,
Oh
aren't
no,
on the
what did
app.
you do?
I know. So yeah, but this is what happens. Honestly, this is
Mortgage or supermarket?
yeah. So I thought, and I said to my husband, I was having this whole chat with him, and he was like, I said, I think we need to start shopping in, I'm not going to drop the names, but the other one, like, I want it, yeah, like, and he was just amazed at the fact that I was, after 30 years, I was willing to swap my shopping habits so that I could kind of be loyal to this particular app and then obviously get the cash back. I don't know what happened to me. Honestly, I've been
I'm
in
more amazed that
marketing
you've stuck with the
all my
same
career.
supermarket for 30 years. Like,
Oh God, we still fall for all the marketing tricks, don't we? But
oh, I'm a marketer's dream, personally, yeah. Except for kind of cards, I guess. But yeah, I half the time I can't even find them. So
but Thank you so much, Paul. That was such a, we went over time, but I think that's indicative of the kind of level of the conversation. So thank you so much. And I'm sure
No
my
worries.
audience will thank you too.
It's been fun. Thanks a lot.
Cheers. Bye.